There's a kind of heat in Miami that's more than just a number on the thermometer. It's a physical weight. It presses down on your shoulders, sticks your shirt to your skin. It makes the air so thick you feel like you're breathing water. The port in Miami in late August is the worst of it. The sun glares off the asphalt and the sides of 1,000 shipping containers until you can't tell where the sky ends and the ground begins. It's a miserable place to be, and I'd been waiting there for 6 hours. I'm a long-haul trucker, been doing it for the better part of 20 years, and I've carried everything from California oranges to John Deere tractors, from sensitive military hardware to a truckload of rubber chickens. I thought I'd seen it all. I was wrong.
This job was unusual from the get-go. It came through a broker I'd never heard of, but the pay was too good to pass up. A sealed trailer, picked up in Miami, straight shot to a nondescript warehouse outside of Chicago. Easy miles, big paycheck. The manifest was a single line, industrial equipment. That's it. No specifics, no weight declaration, no hazardous material warnings. Just a vague, lazy description that could mean anything. When they finally brought the trailer around with a yard dog, it was clean. Too clean. Most trailers that come off a ship are scuffed, dented, streaked with rust from the salt air. This one was pristine white, no logos, not even a speck of dirt. It looked alien, sitting there amongst the grimy, well-traveled veterans of the port. The dock foreman, a heavy-set guy with a face like a worn-out leather boot, just grunted and handed me the paperwork. He didn't make eye contact. "She's all sealed up," he said, his voice flat. "Company wants this one untouched. You pop that seal for any reason, the contract is void and you don't see a dime." He was talking about the bolt seal on the locking bars. It wasn't the usual cheap tin kind. This one was a heavy, cast-iron plug, a deep red color like dried blood, with a strange star-shaped symbol stamped into it that I'd never seen before. It looked more like something you'd use to lock a vault than a trailer full of equipment.
I did my pre-trip inspection out of habit. Kicked the tires, checked the lights, made sure the airlines were hooked up proper. The trailer felt oddly balanced, not heavy in the way machinery should be. It didn't have that dead, solid weight, but there was weird lightness to it, an emptiness. I shrugged it off. A paycheck is a paycheck. I signed the papers, hooked up the rig, and pulled out of the port, the afternoon sun still beating down with a vengeance. It started about 10 miles out, on the turnpike. A sound, a faint thump, thump, thump.
It wasn't the road. I know the rhythm of the highway, the steady beat of a Peterbilt's engine, the hum of 18 tires on pavement. This was different. It was soft, muffled, coming from deep inside the trailer. I turned the radio down. Thump, thump, thump. My first thought was that something came loose. A pallet, maybe. A piece of machinery shifting and knocking against the wall. It's a common enough sound. You learn to ignore the groans and creaks of a heavy load. But this wasn't a random creak. It was rhythmic, deliberate. Then came the other sound. A long, slow scrap, like fingernails dragging across a wooden floor, but deeper, more metallic. Thump, thump. Scrap. I cranked the radio back up, told myself I was just hearing things. The heat plays tricks on you. The monotony of the road makes you imagine stuff. I drove on, through the endless, flat expanse of Florida swampland, the setting sun painting the sky in violent shades of orange and purple. But I couldn't unhear it. Even with Johnny Cash blaring from the speakers, I could still feel it more than hear it. A low, persistent vibration coming from behind me. A steady, patient noise from inside a sealed white box that was supposed to be silent.
The first cold finger of dread traced its way down my spine, a feeling completely out of place in the suffocating Florida heat, and I still had over 1,000 miles to go.
Night fell as I crossed the state line into Georgia. The world outside my cab dissolved into a tunnel of reflected light on dark asphalt, marked by the lonely glow of mile markers counting down a journey that now felt endless. The oppressive heat of the day had been replaced by a thick, humid darkness, and the sounds had gotten worse. They had a new quality to them now, a kind of personality. The thumping wasn't just a random knock anymore. It had a cadence, like someone tapping their fingers on a table, waiting. And the scraping, God, the scraping. It wasn't constant. It would go on for a minute, a slow grating shurr, and then stop. Silence for 5 miles, 10 miles. Just long enough for me to start convincing myself I was going crazy, that it was just a suspension or a loose mud flap. Then it would start again, louder this time, as if to mock me. I tried everything to shut it out. I blasted the radio until my ears hurt. I listened to hours of talk shows, political debates, anything with a human voice. But the sounds had wormed their way under the noise. I started to feel them in the floorboards, a faint tremor that pulsed up through the driver's seat. It was a phantom heartbeat.
My mind started playing tricks on me. At one point, I swore the thumping matched the beat of the song on the radio. When I changed the station, the rhythm of the thumping changed with it. I turned the radio off completely, and the thumping stopped for a full minute before it starting up again, slow and deliberate. Thump, 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 like it was listening, waiting. That's when the real fear started to set in. Not the jumpy kind, but a deep, cold dread that settles in your gut. What the hell was in that trailer? Industrial equipment doesn't knock. It doesn't scrape in patterns. I ran through 100 possibilities. Livestock? No, the manifest would say so, and there'd be ventilation. People? My blood ran cold at the thought. Human trafficking? Could I be hauling people in that box? But the sound wasn't right. It was too hollow, too metallic.
Around 2 a.m., somewhere on I-75 south of Macon, it almost killed me. The scraping had been going on for a solid 20 minutes, a high-pitched, grinding noise that was setting my teeth on edge. I was so focused on it, trying to pinpoint exactly where in the trailer it was coming from, that I didn't see the deer. It just appeared in my headlights, frozen. A doe and 2 fawns. I slammed on the brakes, the air horn shattering the night. The whole rig shuddered and slewed, the trailer trying to overtake the cab. For a terrifying second, I thought I was going to jackknife right there on the interstate. The tires screamed. Then from the trailer came a different sound. A loud, violent crash, followed by a series of sharp, metallic clangs, like a dozen empty bird cages being thrown against the concrete wall. It was so sudden and violent that I flinched, even as I fought the wheel. I managed to get the rig under control. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard it felt like it was going to break them. I pulled over onto the shoulder, the engine rumbling, the hazard lights ticking a frantic rhythm in the dark. The deer were gone. I sat there, shaking, the smell of burnt rubber filling the cab. The trailer was silent, absolutely, totally silent. The knocking, the scraping, it was all gone. For a moment, all I felt was relief. Maybe whatever was loose back there had finally broken or wedged itself into place. The violent stop had fixed it. But the silence that followed was somehow worse than the noise had been. It felt heavy, watchful, the kind of silence that comes after a scream. I sat there on the side of the interstate for a good 30 minutes. Other trucks roared past, their lights briefly illuminating my cab, their wakes rocking my rig. Each one was a reminder of the normal world I used to belong to just a few hours ago.
I knew I shouldn't. I knew what the foreman had said. The contract, the money, my job. But I couldn't do it. I couldn't drive another foot with that thing behind me without knowing. the silence was more unnerving than the noise. At least with the noise, I knew it was there. Now, I wasn't sure of anything. I saw the glow of a truck stop sign a few miles up the road. It was my only option. I had to know, even if it cost me everything. I put the truck in gear and pulled slowly back onto the highway, my eyes darting to my mirrors, half expecting to see the back of the white trailer swinging open on its own.
The truck stop was one of those old, forgotten places, a cracked asphalt lot with only a handful of trucks sleeping under the sickly yellow glare of the vapor lamps. The diner was dark, the gas station attended by a single kid who looked half asleep. It was the perfect place to be alone, the perfect place for a bad decision. I backed the rig into a spot at the far end of the lot, as far from the lights and the other drivers as I could get. I killed the engine. The sudden silence was absolute, a thick blanket pressing in on me. No more thumping, no more scraping, just the hum of another truck's reefer unit 100 yards away and the chirping of crickets. I sat in the cab for what felt like an hour, staring at the back of the trailer in my side mirror. It was just a plain white box. Anonymous, harmless looking. My mind was at war with itself. One half, the professional trucker half, was screaming at me. Leave it alone. It's not your cargo, not your business. You break that seal, you're fired. Blacklisted maybe. Just get some coffee, get back on the road, and pretend you didn't hear anything. Deliver the load and forget it ever happened. But the other half, the part of me that had been listening to that scraping all night, the part that had felt that vibration through the soles of my boots, it couldn't let it go. It was like an itch in my brain that I couldn't scratch. The memory of that sudden, violent crash on the highway was too loud to ignore. What if someone was hurt in there? What if something was seriously damaged and I was about to cause a bigger accident? I used that as my excuse. Safety. I had to check for safety. It was a lie, and I knew it. This wasn't about safety. It was about fear. I had to see what was making the sound that had been torturing me for the last 500 miles.
My hands were sweating. I grabbed the big bolt cutters from behind my seat. They felt impossibly heavy. Every step I took from the cab to the back of the trailer felt like I was walking through deep mud. The night air was thick and damp. The crickets seemed to go silent as I approached the doors. There it was, the seal. That chunk of dark red iron with the strange star symbol. In the dim light from the lot, it looked almost black. It was cold to the touch, solid, final.
I stood there for another 10 minutes just looking at it, listening. There was nothing, not a sound. My imagination started to run wild again. Maybe it really was just a piece of machinery. A big metal press, or a lathe that had broken its restraints. The crash I'd heard was it finally tipping over for good. That's why it was quiet now. It was a perfectly logical explanation. I could just get back in my truck and go. But I could still hear the scraping in my memory, the rhythmic, deliberate knocking. Machinery doesn't do that. I put the jaws of the bolt cutters around the steel hasp of the seal. It was thicker than I expected. I squeezed the handles. My arms trembled with the effort. It was a point of no return. The metal groaned in protest. With the final, desperate heave, I put all my weight into it. Snap! The sound was like a gunshot in the dead quiet lot. It echoed off the other trailers. I froze, my heart pounding, convinced that every light in the place would turn on, that doors would fly open, and other drivers would come out yelling. But nothing happened. The only sound was the broken piece of the seal pinging as it hit the asphalt.
The lock was free. The heavy metal bars were now the only thing keeping the doors closed. My hand was shaking as I reached for the latch. It was cold and slick with dew. I took a deep breath, the air tasting of diesel and damp earth. I braced myself for a tipped-over machine, for a dead animal, for people, hurt or worse. I was not prepared for what I was about to see. I pulled the handle.
and the heavy right door groaned open on its hinges. A smell wafted out. Not oil or steel or sweat. It was the smell of old dust, of a room that had been sealed for 1,000 years, and a faint metallic tang, like ozone after a lightning strike. I fumbled for the big mag light I keep clipped to my belt, clicked it on, and pointed the beam into the darkness.
The first thing I saw was the glint. The powerful beam of my flashlight sliced into the cavernous darkness of the trailer and was instantly shattered, thrown back at me from 100 different angles. I squinted, my eyes struggling to make sense of the fractured light. My mind scrambled to identify the shapes. Cages. The entire trailer, from front to back, from floor to ceiling, was filled with them. They were stacked 3 high, organized in neat rows with a narrow aisle down the middle. They looked like oversized bird cages, but they were made of a dull, dark metal, something like wrought iron, forged into intricate, twisting patterns. There must have been hundreds of them, and in each cage, facing the aisle, was a mirror. My initial wave of terror was replaced by sheer baffling confusion. Cages with mirrors? Industrial equipment? Was this some kind of bizarre art installation? A prop for a movie? The logical part of my brain desperately tried to grab on to this explanation. The sounds I heard, maybe some of the cage goes were loose. The big crash on the highway was some of them toppling over. It made a strange kind of sense. I felt a wave of relief so intense it almost made me laugh. I was an idiot. I had broken a multi-$1,000 contract and was about to lose my job over some goddamn arts and crafts project. I took a cautious step up into the trailer, the flashlight beam dancing ahead of me. The air inside was cold, a deep cellar-like cold that had nothing to do with the humid Georgia night. The smell was stronger in here, that smell of ancient dust and charged air. I walked down the narrow center aisle, shining my light from side to side. Cages and mirrors. That's all there was. Never beautiful, in a strange Gothic way. The mirrors weren't perfect, commercial glass. They were old, maybe silver-backed, with faint ripples and distortions in them, like looking into dark water. I stopped in front of one of the cages on the bottom row. I bent down, curious, and pointed my flashlight directly at the mirror inside, expecting to see my own tired, sweat-streaked face reflected back.
But I didn't. I saw the flashlight beam, a perfect circle of white light, but I didn't see my hand holding it. I didn't see my body behind it, and I didn't see the row of cages and the truck stop lights behind me. My breath caught in my throat. I looked again, my brain refusing to process what my eyes were seeing. The mirror was not reflecting the inside of my trailer. It was reflecting a room. A dim gray room with walls made of rough-hewn stone like a dungeon or a cell. The light from my flashlight illuminated a small patch of the stone wall and a section of dusty floor, but nothing else. It was like I was holding my light up to a small open window. My heart started to hammer against my ribs again. This wasn't possible. It was a trick. Some kind of video screen? I reached out a trembling hand and touched the surface. It was cold, hard glass, a mirror. I knocked on it with my knuckle, a solid, dull thud. Frantic now, I swung my flashlight to the next cage, and the next, and the next. Same thing. Each mirror showed the exact same view of the same dark stone room. It was like every single one of them was a window looking into this one single place.
I backed away down the aisle, a low moan escaping my lips. My light swept across the rows of cages, and that's when I saw it. About halfway down the trailer, in one of the mirrors on the top left stack. Something was different. There was a shadow in the corner of that particular reflection, a dark shape that wasn't in any of the others. I held my light steady on it, my hand shaking so badly the beam trembled. The shape was huddled on the floor. It was hard to make out the details in the gloom, but it was a dense, concentrated darkness. At first, I thought it was just a pile of rags or a piece of furniture. I stared at it, holding my breath, my mind screaming at me to run, to slam the doors and drive away and never look back.
And then it moved. It wasn't a sudden movement. It was a slow, deliberate unfolding. A motion that was hideously, impossibly fluid, like a spider uncurling its legs. It began to rise, the shadow detaching itself from the deeper shadows of the corner. It was tall and gaunt, a stick figure drawn from nightmare fuel. Its limbs were too long, its joints in the wrong places. It wasn't reflecting me. It wasn't reflecting anything in the trailer. It was in that stone room, and it had been there in the dark the whole time. It stood there for a second, a tall, broken silhouette against the gray stone. I couldn't see a face, just a dark, smooth oval where a face should be. And then, slowly, horribly, that oval shape began to turn. It wasn't turning to look around the stone room. It was turning toward the surface of the mirror. It was turning to look at me.
I didn't scream. There was no air in my lungs to make a sound. My entire body was frozen in a single primal instinct. You have been seen. The feeling wasn't just in my eyes. It was a physical sensation, a pressure building behind my forehead, a chilling cold that had nothing to do with the air in the trailer. It knew I was there. Looking through that tiny window of glass and iron, that thing in the dark room knew it was being watched. I have no memory of the next 10 seconds. It's a black hole in my mind. One moment, I was standing there, paralyzed, watching that faceless head turn towards me. The next, I was on the asphalt outside, scrambling backwards on my hands and knees, gasping for breath like a drowning man.
My training, my professional instincts, all of it was gone. I was just an animal trying to get away from the predator. I slammed the trailer door shut. The sound of it, a hollow boom, was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. I fumbled with the locking bars, my hands slick with sweat, my fingers feeling like useless sausages. I got the second door shut and slammed the latch home. The broken seal lay on the ground. I didn't care. I scrambled back to my cab, threw a heavy-duty padlock I kept for emergencies on the latch, and locked it. It wasn't the right procedure, but I didn't care. All I could think about was putting as much steel as possible between me and whatever was inside that white box. I didn't go to the diner. I didn't get any sleep. I jumped into the cab, fired up the engine, and got out of that truck stop so fast my tires screamed on the pavement. I didn't look in my mirrors. I couldn't. I just drove. The rest of the drive to Chicago is a blur of caffeine, nicotine, and pure uncut terror. The sun came up, but it didn't bring any warmth. The world looked flat and gray. Every time a car passed me, I flinched at the brief reflection in my window. I avoided looking at my own rearview mirror, keeping my eyes locked on the road ahead, trying to pretend the trailer behind me didn't exist. It was silent now. The silence was absolute. I knew why. Before, it didn't know I was there. It was just existing, tapping, scraping, living its life in that dark room, broadcast into my world through those mirrors. But after the jolt on the highway, and after I opened the door, now it knew. It was just sitting in there, watching, waiting. I dropped the trailer at the depot in Chicago in record time. It was a blind drop. No one there to check me in, thank God. Just leave it in the designated spot and go. I disconnected the air lines and the power cord, lowered the landing gear, and pulled the fifth wheel pin. I didn't even do a final walk around. I just got in my bobtail chuck and drove away. I didn't look back. In my rearview mirror, I could see the plain white trailer sitting there alone in the vast empty yard, and I swear I could feel 1,000 unseen eyes watching me go. I quit that company the next day, said my rig had a mechanical issue and I was heading home. I never told them what happened. Who would believe me? They'd think I was on drugs or having a psychotic break. Maybe I was. I don't drive long haul anymore. I do local stuff now, home every night. But it didn't help. The experience broke something inside me. I can't look at mirrors the same way. Sometimes, late at night, if I'm in the bathroom and I glance in the mirror, just for a split second,
I don't see my own reflection. I see a gray stone wall. I don't know what that cargo was or where it was going. An art installation? A science experiment? Or something older? Maybe some things aren't meant to be transported. Maybe they're meant to be left buried. I think about those cages, about those mirrors, windows, not reflectors. And I wonder how many other windows like that are out there, packed away in plain white trailers, crisscrossing the country in the dead of night?
So if you're ever out on the interstate late at night and you see a clean, unmarked white trailer, give it a wide berth. You don't know what it's carrying, and you don't ever want to look inside, because there are things in the dark places of this world, and sometimes they're looking for a way out, and all they need is for someone curious to open the door.